Hey friends, welcome to the Taking Your Next Step podcast from Collegians for Christ. Through each episode, we will journey together focusing on becoming better followers of Jesus. If you're eager, like I am, to follow Jesus Christ, then take your next step now by joining us in today's episode. So we've been taking episodes talking about God, different ways we can talk about Him, different ways we can describe Him. Ultimately, it's the way God has revealed Himself to us through Scripture. It's a privilege that we can even talk about Him. We can use our language to describe Him, but we've talked about that there is a limitation, if you will, in our language as we try to talk about God, because we're talking about something, someone greater than our understanding, beyond our comprehension. When we talk about God, we're not talking about another person. We're not talking about another man or just a leader of humanity. We're talking about God Almighty, the Creator, the one that is beyond comprehension, beyond our imagination, beyond our understanding. Now, just because He is beyond our comprehension, our understanding, does not mean we cannot comprehend some aspects of God. It does not mean we cannot understand certain things about God. That's the reason He's given us scriptures there that we can understand about His characteristics, His attributes. And as we continue going through looking at the attributes of God, we will continue to examine the different ways and the different characteristics God has revealed about Himself that make up the total, if you will, the total sum total of who God is. And we think about the fact that God is beyond our understanding. Why is that? Why is God so far beyond? Listen to some verses here that I would like to read that really cast this truth, the truth that God is beyond our understanding. Job 11:7 says, "Canst thou by searching find out God? Canst thou find out the Almighty unto perfection?" As Job is going through this hard time in his life, he is examining himself. He's examining his situation, his circumstances. I'm sure he's asking a lot of whys. Why is this happening? God, how could this be happening? I'm sure he's examining his theology, what he knows to be true about God. I mean, you think about yourself when you become into a hard situation or a severe trial comes into your life unexpected, unwanted. It causes you to question things. It can cause doubt to creep in. Now, we understand, if you know about Job's life, in one day he lost his family, he lost his business, he lost his retirement, he lost his employees, and then the next day he lost his health. And so a severe trial, one that often when I begin to complain and gripe, sometimes I think about Job and it causes me to stop, to just shut up, because what on earth do I have to complain about in comparison to what Job went through? It reminds me how much worse things could be. But as Job is going through this, he's waging a mental battle, I'm sure, just like you have at different times in your life, and it begins to cause you to question certain things. And sometimes questioning is good, as long as we're willing to seek out the answers. And as Job did that, he began to think and see and begin to realize, okay, God, I've known you. God, I've known this to be true about you, but now I'm not just going to know, but I'm going to experience. I'm going to know what I've known mentally in my mind. I'm going to see that come to fruition. And Job is wrestling through what he knows to be true about God. And as he's wrestling through that, and as he begins to come to the end, he has these thoughts: canst thou by searching find out God? Can I find out every aspect about God? No. There's some things that you and I cannot fully understand. We cannot fully imagine, because God is so far beyond that. He says, "Canst thou find out the Almighty unto perfection?" Surely you can list on a piece of paper all 20 characteristics of God, and that is it. And we can fully understand each one of them. That's not how it works. God is so far beyond our comprehension. Psalm 139 may be a very familiar psalm to you. We're going to read just a verse here, number 6. It says this: "Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it." What knowledge is David talking about here? What knowledge is too wonderful? It's the knowledge of God. It's the knowledge that God is omnipresent, that He's everywhere present at the same time, that God is omniscient, that He knows what is going on in David's life. David sits down and says, look, I cannot go anywhere to hide from you. I cannot think a thought that you do not already know. And as he sat there and meditated and thought about the truths of God's attributes, of who God is, it brought him to say, such knowledge as I think about God, as I try to wrap my mind around Him, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. Now, when we think about high, we always think about elevation. We think about from low to high, something being a high ceiling or high in the sky. But this is high as being beyond. He said, I cannot attain unto it. I'm having problems here. I'm lacking in my understanding. I'm lacking in my knowledge to fully have a full comprehension of who God is. It doesn't mean he didn't know certain aspects of what God has revealed. What he's saying is God is so far beyond my understanding, so far beyond my knowledge. We'll run over to the New Testament and we'll see Paul in Romans chapter 11 speaking very similarly to this. He says this, oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. Watch what he says, how unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. And he begins to kind of talk like Isaiah did, for who hath known the mind of the Lord, or who hath been his counselor, or who hath first given to him, and it shall be recompensed unto him again. God in Isaiah chapter 40 begins to ask those questions. Who's taught me? Who give me the instruction book? Who's told me what to do? Nobody, because I am greater. But he said, oh, the depth and the riches both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. What Paul is saying, you cannot stop searching. You cannot put in enough effort to discover just who God is. As we think about, we're talking about the attributes of God, you say, well, what attribute are you talking about? I'm not necessarily talking about an attribute. This idea that God is beyond, or He is so far above, we talked about transcendence. It's just the truth that comes out of all the attributes. It's not an attribute per se about God, but this is a truth that comes out of the attributes of God. God is so far beyond you and I. He's so far beyond our comprehension. But what's so beautiful about that is we can still comprehend Him. We can still understand truths about Him. It's not that this great God is beyond us in such a way that there's no relationship, that there's no communication. I mean, it could be that God is so far beyond that we could not even talk about Him. But God gave us language. God gave us His Word that we can read, we can understand. And when I think about the fact that God, the truth that God is so far beyond, so far above, beyond our understanding, it challenges me, one, because I can always continue studying and learning about God. I'm never going to arrive. I'm never going to have the full understanding to where I say, okay, I got it. I'm good. I can move on to something else now. You see, Paul said the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. And he says how unsearchable are His judgments. Just because they're unsearchable doesn't mean we don't search for them, doesn't mean we don't pursue Him. You see, we pursue God because He first pursued us. He was always previous in this idea of a relationship. But I just want to bring out the truth that, yes, God is so far beyond our understanding, and it has to be that way. You see, we humans want to be able to understand everything. We want to be able to narrow it down to a list. We want to be able to narrow it down to the nuts and bolts. That's how we work. But when it comes to God, there has to be some things about God that we cannot fully know or understand. Why? Because He's infinite. We're finite. He's God, and we are created by Him. We are humans. We are not equal with God. You see, He has a knowledge. We have knowledge. We get our knowledge from Him. So His knowledge has to be greater than our knowledge. And so when we come to God, we can pursue Him. We can seek Him. When we come to His Word, we don't just come to it one time and we're done. We can continually come to it day in and day out. And guess what? We can learn something new. We can learn something more. I think for me, as we think about how great God is, There's tremendous implications in it, but for me, it just makes me want to continue seeking Him, to learn more about Him, to understand His judgments are, are unsearchable. His ways, it says here, past finding out. Think about that. Now, you could say, well, if they're past finding out and His judgments are unsearchable, why on earth continue? Heck with it. I mean, I can't fully know God, but then we're reminded that God pursued us. And we're reminded that God reveals a great host of information about Himself. There's lots of stuff that God reveals about Himself in His Word. Why? Because He wants you to know Him. He wants to know you. He wants to be in a relationship with you. He terms this relationship as a father-child. He terms the relationship as a friend, as Jesus talked about in John 15. So as we can consider this great God that we've been talking about with all the attributes, and we're going to continue on with some of the attributes, the omnis, omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and we'll come to kind of saving the last for the Trinity. We'll have to work through that through probably a few different episodes. But these are the great attributes, the characteristics of God, and as we look at them, we pull out just this awe, this wow, this splendor, this majesty, this beauty, the wisdom that God has. And it should create in us this desire to learn and seek and just pursue Him more and more as we go through our daily lives. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, we would love for you to share it with a friend or subscribe so that you can stay up to date on the latest studies. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.